Hey guys, Garrett back for Sableye the Mind Sculptor with another Commander deck tech. So today we are going to look at one of the new gods from Amonkhet. We are looking at Kefnet the Mindful. So Kefnet is a god creature, so he has indestructible, but there is a rider on whether or not he can attack or block. That is the new type of thing that they're doing for gods. It was a little bit different in Pharaohs, but it's what we have now. So Kefnet is a 5/5 for 3 flying indestructible, can't attack or block unless you have 7 or more cards in hand, and for 4 mana you can draw a card and return a land you control to its owner's hand. So what this lets you do with Kefnet is fill up your hand fast if you have 4 mana, because you basically get to fill it up at the rate of 2 cards at the cost of having to put a land back in your hand. So let's move on and see what I've done to abuse this ability. So first we got, basic land in the deck. You always need islands in your blue decks. And then Radiant Fountain is a land that whenever it ETBs, you gain 2 life. So this is just a way that you can gain a little bit of life off of the ability if you don't have another land to make land drops with. And Halimar Depths lets you look at the top 3 cards of your library and put them back in any order, but it enters the battlefield tapped. So those are just the 2 enters the battlefield lands that you can kind of abuse with this ability. And then I also have Lonely Sandbar, Remote Isle, and Teleria West, which are all lands that cycle. Lonely Sandbar cycles for a single blue, Remote Isle cycles for 2 colorless, and Teleria West can be transmuted for 3 mana. It's not really that necessary in this deck, although there is one land that I'll be talking about later that it is good to get with Teleria West. Basically, what Kefnet lets you do is play these as your turn 1 lands, and they all enter tapped, but it won't matter because you can pick them up later. You don't have to be regretful about not getting to use their real purpose. So you can pick up your cycling land and actually cycle it if you want to, which is just kind of nice. And then we got 2 more lands that I thought worked well with Kefnet. Sprazin Scary, which comes into play tapped with 2 depletion counters on it, and then you can tap it and remove a depletion counter from it to add 2 blue mana to your mana pool, and then if there are no depletion counters on it, you sacrifice it. So you can basically use this to pick it up and reset the number of depletion counters on it, which is just kind of cool. And then Glacial Chasm has a cumulative upkeep of paying 2 life. When it enters the battlefield, you got to sacrifice a land, and creatures you control can't attack, but any damage that would be dealt to you is instead reduced to 0. So if you guys are unaware of how cumulative upkeep works, every turn on your upkeep you put an age counter on it, and then you have to pay its cumulative upkeep cost, in this case 2 life. So with Kefnet, you can pick it up to reset the number of age counters on it if you want to be able to have it in play for longer, or if you just need it for a few turns, you can have it down for that time and then put it back in your hand and sit on it until you need it again instead of having to sacrifice it to the cumulative upkeep cost. Moving right along, we have ways that Kefnet's ability gets better. So for instance, first we have Heartstone. The cost of each creature ability requiring an activation cost is reduced by 1, can't be reduced less than 1. So this makes Kefnet's ability cost 3, which makes it a little bit more viable in Commander. Rings of the Bright Hearth, which says whenever you play an activated ability that isn't a mana ability, you can pay 2 to replicate it. So that lets you get 6 for 2 cards instead of 4 for 1. This gets better, I promise, because next we have Training Ground. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost up to 2 less to activate. This amount can't reduce the amount of mana to less than 1. So basically what Training Grounds lets you do with Kefnet is have 2 mana draw a card at any time. And with Rings of the Bright Hearth, it lets you have 2 mana draw 2 cards at any time. So Training Grounds is a very powerful card in this deck, and it is one of the main cards that makes this deck tick. Other things that make his ability better are Alhamret's Archive, which doubles up the number of cards you draw, except for on your draw step. Illusionist's Bracers, which is an equipment that allows the abilities of an equipped creature to be copied, and Thrawn Turbine, which is a 1 mana artifact that says during your upkeep you can add 1 or 2 mana to your mana pool, but it cannot be spent to play spells. So basically, this is on your upkeep, you get to activate his ability for 2 mana if you feel like it instead of the original 4. The reason it's worded like that, if you guys are curious, is because there used to be a thing called Mana Burn, and with Thrawn Turbine, you wouldn't want to have to burn yourself for 2 if you didn't have something to spend it on. So next up, we're just going to be looking at our ramp package, and there's a lot of ramp in this deck because there are some heavy payoffs and you want to be able to activate Kefnet's ability a lot to dig through your deck. So first we have Palladiumer, 3 mana, taps for 2 mana. Next we have Solemn Simulacrum, not really ramp so much as just a really good card that happens to ramp you. It's a 2/2 for 4. When it ETBs, you search your library for a basic land card, put it into play tapped, and then shuffle your library. And when Solemn dies, you draw a card. So this is just a good creature. I understand that I have the wrong art of it on screen. Please don't hate me. Soul Ring, of course, big staple in Commander. 1 mana, taps to add 2 mana. Should be banned, but for some reason they have decided to let it stay in. Star Compass, 2 mana, comes into play, taps, and then taps for a color that a basic land you control could produce. So this will be just a blue mana rock for 2. Thought Vessel says you have no maximum hand size, and you can tap to add 1 to your mana pool. The no maximum hand size thing does come in pretty clutch with Kefnet because you will end up going over your maximum hand size sometimes. Felwar Stone taps for 1 mana of any color that an opponent could produce, which is fine, especially with cards like Nykthos floating around that make it so that you can get any color from it. But it doesn't really matter because this deck is not very hard on your mana. We then have Mind Stone, 2 mana, taps to add 1, and can turn into a card later in the game. Doubling Cube, for 3 mana, doubles the amount of each type of mana in your mana pool. I normally wouldn't run this because I'm not a huge fan of the card, but it does have some application with a few other cards in our deck. War and Power Stone, 3 mana, taps to add 2. Pristine Talisman, 3 mana, taps to add 1, and you gain a life, which is kind of important in control decks. Basalt Monolith, again, not a card that I'm a huge fan of, but I'm including because it has synergies elsewhere. It lets you tap to add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool, but it doesn't untap during your untap step. You can pay 3 mana at any point in time to untap it, though. Hedron Archive, which for 4 mana taps for 2, and you can also pay 2 and tap it to turn it into 2 cards. Thrawn Dynamo, 4 mana taps for 3, and Gilded Lotus, 5 mana taps for 3 mana of a specific color. So that's a lot of ramp. We need it because a lot of our spells are a little bit more expensive, and we don't really have a lot of things to do on those turns anyway, besides activate Kefnet's ability. So it's good to make sure that you hit your speed bumps in this deck. So moving on, we have a couple of the closest thing blue gets to board wipes, which is the board bounces. Starting with Inundate, which returns all non-blue creatures to their opponent's hand for 6 mana. Evacuation returns all creatures to their owner's hands. Washout, return all permanents of the color of your choice to their owner's hand. Engulf the Shore, which returns all creatures with toughness less than or equal to the number of islands you control to their owner's hands. Heavy island deck, this will usually be like 4 or 5, which is kind of nice because you won't bounce Kefnet. It's kind of bad because you won't bounce everything that they have. So, you know, take this one with a grain of salt. I just happen to like it. And Thing in the Ice, which will eventually flip in this deck once you've removed all of its ice counters and turn into a big 7/8 beater that bounces everything. Then moving on to just some other miscellaneous cards that I have in the deck as, ramp payoffs. We have Mind's Dilation. Whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, that player exiles the top card of his or her library. If it's a non-land spell, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Eternity Vessel enters the battlefield with X charge counters on it, where X is your life total, and then whenever a land enters the battlefield, you can have your life total become the number of charge counters on Eternity Vessel. This is good because this deck will always be hitting its land drops, so you don't ever have to worry about not being able to reset your life total. Time Warp, because I like Time Warp. Venser's Journal, because the no hand limit thing is kind of cool, and because gaining 7 or 8 life a turn is also cool. Royal Elemental, 3/2 flying for 6. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain control of target creature for as long as you control Royal Elemental. This seems pretty strong. It will end up getting killed. It's just a fun creature, though. Honestly, I just have fun, catching things with this creature. Generally, they are going to have creatures with sacrifice abilities that you can use, or creatures that say whenever they deal combat damage. And that's where this guy really shines, because he can definitely abuse those creatures for the few turns you're allowed to keep them. Steel Hellkite, 6 for a 5/5 flyer that can just blow up huge sections of their board with his activated ability, which is pay X, destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. This is really good on 0 usually, but sometimes you ramp it up to destroy enchantments and things. It's a really good card. I also, whenever I play blue, even if I'm not playing a counterspell heavy deck, I like to have 5 or 6 counterspells, so we're just going to go through those. Desertion, because it's funny. Rewind, because with Kefnet, rewind, untapping your lands translates to getting an extra card at least, but also being able to hold up mana for other counterspells or anything of that nature. Insidious Will, because I think it's pretty undervalued. 4 mana counter target spell is bad, but sometimes 4 mana copy target instant or sorcery spell you may choose new targets for the copy is good. Sometimes the redirect ability is really good. So, yeah. Imagine your opponent playing a draw spell that says target player, for instance, Blue Sun Zenith, and then you get to draw the cards instead. That's just a really funny, strong ability, in my opinion. Next, we have Swan Song. This is a very cheap way to counter whatever disruption they throw at you, and the 2/2 bird really doesn't mean anything. So this is like a better dispel, in my opinion, in this deck. Mana Leak, because Mana Leak, and Counterspell, because how can you build a blue deck without original Counterspell? And then lastly, I just wanted to throw in Treachery. I didn't really know where to put it. When it comes, it's a 5 mana enchant creature. You control enchanted creature. When it comes into play, untap up to 5 lands. So this is just a good card, and I like it because it lets you untap those lands. So as I said earlier, with Kefnet, you're getting at least a free card out of this. Then this deck doesn't really play a lot of creatures, so I decided to put in a bunch of defensive cards. So Dissipation Field, whenever a permanent deals damage to you, return it to its owner's hand. This really keeps people from attacking you. Like, they'll realize they have to attack you, but they won't do it until the last possible second because it's very annoying to have your creatures keep getting bounced. Propaganda, because people just don't like having to pay extra mana. They love to play things on curve. This is why Rhystic Study is good. It also makes Propaganda very strong. And then Vortex Elemental, I understand, is just like a better 1/1 Death Touch for 1, or not even better, really. Worse 1/1 Death Touch for 1, but it feels different than swinging into a 1/1 Death Toucher. Vortex Elemental is just a great deterrent to attackers. So I said this deck was a combo deck. What are the combos? We got Pilipala Grand Architect. So Pilipala, for those of you who are unaware, was a 1/1 flyer for 2 with 2 and untap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Grand Architect is a 1/3 for 3. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. 1 blue, target artifact creature becomes blue until end of turn. And tap an untapped blue creature you control, add 2 mana to your mana pool, spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. So what you do is you tap your Pilipala, then spend that 2 mana that you just generated to untap it and add 1 blue to your mana pool. Then you tap it again for 2 mana, untap it, add 1 blue to your mana pool. This will basically end up getting you infinite blue mana. With Kefnet, this lets you draw through your entire deck and win. Next combo, Gilded Lotus says tap, add 3 mana of any 1 color to your mana pool. Training Grounds, activated abilities of creatures you control cost up to 2 less to activate. And Filigree Sages, 2 and a blue, untap target artifact. So note that this combo also works with Hearthstone. Basically, you play the ability of the Filigree Sages to untap your Gilded Lotus, and then add 3 with your Gilded Lotus. Now you're only paying 1 to untap it with the Filigree Sages, so you untap it for 1, tap it for 3, untap it for 1, tap it for 3. Infinite mana, infinite cards, you win the game. Palinchron High Tide, pretty sure you guys understand this one. You play the High Tide, then you play Palinchron, and you tap out all your lands. Palinchron will then untap 7 lands. You have 14 mana available. Spend 4 of it to bounce the Palinchron. Play it again, generating another 14. Infinite mana, you win the game. Basalt Monolith plus Rings of Brighthearth. Basically, you will use the Rings of Brighthearth to activate the Basalt Monolith's untap ability twice. So you generate 6 mana when you untap it, and you generate 6 mana, only costs you 5. So you get infinite colorless mana. This is not quite as good as any of the other combos, but it will let you cycle pretty deep in your deck, and depending on what cards you have, you'll just win the game anyway. So Doubling Cube, Filigree Sages, and Training Ground also will win you the game. It takes a little bit of mana to get started because you have to have enough that doubling it and then untapping the cube is worth your mana. But with Training Grounds, it's pretty minimal. Also works with Hearthstone. Also works with no mana reducing ability. It just costs a lot of mana to get started. So how do you win the game? Once you have all your cards, you just Blue Sun Zenith. Target player draws X cards, shuffle Blue Sun Zenith into its owner's library, and it's X blue blue blue. So you just make somebody draw a million cards, that kills them, shuffles it back. You get it again, make them draw a million cards, shuffle it back, draw for it again, make them draw a million cards, and that's GG. We also have Stroke of Genius, just says target player draws X cards, so it's a little bit less powerful. I have it in the deck anyway because this deck can generate enough mana to make Stroke of Genius worthwhile, and go infinite with colorless mana using the Rings of Brighthearth combo. Then you can kill one person. Another thing about these combos is that once you're infinite with mana, you can actually draw to your counter spells. So if someone tries to counter your Blue Sun Zenith, you just counter their counter spell. If they try again, just draw to your next counter spell. Because infinite mana means you can draw infinitely with Kefnet. So let's just look at our tutors real quick. I only ran the 3 relevant transmuters. Dizzy Spell. 1 mana, target creature gets -3, -0 until end of turn, but it transmutes for 3. So Transmute, if you're unaware, lets you search your library for a card with the same CMC, in this case 1. Muddle the Mixture, 2 mana counter target instant or sorcery spell, but it also transmutes for 3. You get something for 2 mana. Drift of Phantasms, just a 0/5 defender flying for 3, but transmutes for 3 mana. You can get something for 3 mana to finish up your combo. So next we're just going to look at cards I put in for fun. We got Pull from Tomorrow, draw X cards and discard a card at instant speed for X and blue. X blue blue, sorry. I have this one because it's just more efficient than the other X draw spells. It can't target another player though, that's kind of its downside. Time Warp, because who doesn't love Time Warp? Party Jace, because Party Jace lets everybody draw a card, and then he lets just you draw a card. And I don't think anybody has ever attacked my Party Jace unless they have less than 20 cards in their library or something. Party Jace is just a Howling Mine with upside, basically. Vidalcan Plotter. So when it comes into play, exchange control of target land you control and target land an opponent controls. You play this, then you bounce the land you control, free land. Ha, that used to me. Thassa, God of the Sea. The blue Theros God, actually. 5/5 indestructible, not a creature unless you have at least 5 devotion to blue. But she has upsides. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1, which is the main reason I'm running her. And she has 2 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn, which could be relevant sometimes with the Steel Hellkite, for instance, but not really why she's in here. Arcanus the Omnipotent. For 6 mana is a 3/4 that lets you tap to draw 3 cards, and for 2 mana you can return him to his owner's hand. Yeah, just tap, draw 3 cards. That's about all you gotta know about this guy. Then lastly, single Dig Through Time, because I don't have any graveyard shenanigans, and Dig Through Time is extremely powerful to just throw out there at the end of the turn. I mean, you get to look at so many cards, assemble the combo end of turn with Dig Through Time, play it out and win on your next main phase. So that's the deck. I hope you guys like it. This is kind of a new thing for me. I haven't built very many combo decks in my life, so please critique me harshly. Also, a note about budget. This deck costs $200 in paper, but it only costs $40 online. I play online, so I kind of built around that budget. There are definitely ways to budget it out in paper. Some of these cards are just ridiculously expensive in paper compared to their online prices. So, sorry, paper players, that I kind of did that to you. But for online players, yeah, you know, Magic Online, Master Race, or whatever. Other than that, I don't think I'm going to make this into a series. I'm not going to promise to do all of the gods because some of them are really stinkers. I just liked this one. And that's all I have to say, so peace out.